Hey guys, it's Stack Lessons, another practice run for you, 20 questions, covering security monitoring services, IAM credential hygiene, and well-architected sustainability pillar. 10 seconds per question to lock in your answer. Pause whenever you need a longer think. Have fun with it. Keep your focus here. Question 1. Pick the complete answer. Conteso Manufacturing stores engineering design files in Amazon S3. Files are accessed frequently in the 30 days after upload, then rarely accessed but must remain immediately retrievable. After 12 months, files must be retained for compliance but retrieval delays of a few hours are acceptable. A solutions architect is configuring an S3 lifecycle policy to automatically transition objects between storage classes. Which two storage classes should the lifecycle policy transition objects into? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option D. 2 answers required. Intelligent tearing and deep archive both sound plausible. S3 standard infrequent access is the correct transition target at the 30-day mark. It maintains millisecond retrieval availability while charging a lower storage rate in exchange for a per-retrieval fee, making it cost-effective for data that is accessed occasionally, but must be available immediately when requested. S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval is the correct transition target after 12 months. It provides standard retrieval in 3 to 5 hours and bulk retrieval in 5 to 12 hours, aligning with the scenario's tolerance for a few hours of delay. Storage costs are significantly lower than standard IA, appropriate for long-term compliance archives. S3 Intelligent Tearing automatically monitors access patterns and moves objects between tiers. However, it adds a per-object monitoring charge and does not define an explicit archival transition at the 12-month mark. Without additional configuration, it is better suited to data with unpredictable access patterns. S3 One-Zone Infrequent Access stores data in only a single availability zone, reducing durability. This is inappropriate for compliance-critical files that require high durability across multiple physically separate locations. S3 Glacier Deep Archive has standard retrieval times of 12 hours or more, which exceeds the requirement for retrieval within a few hours, and is better suited to data accessed less than once per year. Let's trace what happens to this design file over its lifetime, phase by phase. Imagine you're an engineer at Conteso. You upload a design file on Monday. Your team uses it heavily for the next 30 days. After that, it just sits there, but your legal team says keep it. A year in, compliance wants it archived, and a few hours delay is fine. That's 3 phases. S3 standard covers the first 30 days, fast, no questions asked. On day 30, the lifecycle rule drops it into standard infrequent access, same instant retrieval, lower storage cost, small per retrieval fee. At 12 months, it moves to Glacier Flexible Retrieval. You get your file back in 3 to 5 hours. That's inside the window. Glacier Deep Archive takes 12 hours minimum. That blows past the requirement. That's the trap. All right. Question 2. Solve the situation, not the key word. A solutions architect at Northwind Traders is designing a security strategy for a publicly accessible e-commerce platform hosted on AWS. The platform must be protected from 2 distinct threat categories: large-scale volumetric attacks that overwhelm network bandwidth at layers 3 and 4, and malicious HTTP requests targeting the application layer such as SQL injection and cross-site scripting. Which 2 AWS services should be combined to address both threat categories? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Match each threat layer to its dedicated AWS tool. AWS WAF is a web application firewall that inspects and filters HTTP and HTTPS traffic at the application layer, Layer 7. It uses configurable rules and AWS managed rule groups to block malicious web requests, including SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and other common application exploits before they reach the origin server. AWS Shield provides managed DDoS protection. Shield standard is automatically included for all AWS customers and defends against volumetric floods, protocol attacks, and reflection attacks targeting layers 3 and 4. Shield Advanced adds a 24/7 DDoS response team, enhanced detection, and financial protection against scaling charges caused by DDoS events. Amazon Guard Duty is a continuous threat detection service that analyzes CloudTrail events, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs to surface malicious activity and anomalous behavior inside the AWS environment. It does not inspect or block inbound HTTP traffic in real time. Amazon Macy uses machine learning to discover, classify, and protect sensitive data stored in Amazon S3. It addresses data exposure risk rather than network or application layer attacks. Amazon Inspector performs automated vulnerability assessments against EC2 instances and container images, identifying software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposure in the workload configuration, not live attack traffic. All right, now for question 3. The security team at Fabricom Solutions suspects their AWS environment has been compromised after observing unusual API call patterns and potential data exfiltration behavior. They need a service that continuously monitors CloudTrail management events, VPC flow logs, and DNS query logs for malicious activity and generates actionable threat findings using machine learning. Which AWS service should they enable? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. CloudTrail, VPC flow logs, DNS logs together point to exactly one service. Amazon Guard Duty is a managed threat detection service that continuously analyzes CloudTrail management events, VPC flow logs, and Route 53 DNS logs using machine learning, anomaly detection, and integrated threat intelligence feeds to identify threats such as compromised instances, credential theft, unusual API activity, and potential exfiltration patterns. AWS Security Hub aggregates, normalizes, and prioritizes findings from Guard Duty and other security services, but does not perform the underlying threat detection itself. AWS Config tracks resource configuration changes and evaluates them against compliance rules, but does not detect active threats or analyze network and API activity. Amazon Inspector performs automated vulnerability assessments on EC2 instances and container images, but does not analyze CloudTrail, VPC flow logs, or DNS logs for behavioral threats. Okay, question 4. Small wording, big difference. The security team at Northwind Technology needs to implement two separate monitoring capabilities. First, they must receive an alert whenever an IAM account password policy is modified, including capturing which identity made the change. Second, they must continuously evaluate whether all Amazon EBS volumes attached to EC2 instances are encrypted and automatically identify any non-compliant volumes. Which two AWS services should they use to address these requirements? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option D. Config sees what changed. CloudTrail sees who changed it, both needed here. AWS CloudTrail records all AWS API calls as immutable log events, capturing the caller's identity, the source IP address, the timestamp, and the parameters of every action taken in the account. When an IAM password policy is modified via the Update Account Password Policy API, CloudTrail logs the event with the full caller identity, making it the correct service for auditing who made the change and when. AWS Config is a service that continuously monitors and records AWS resource configurations and evaluates them against desired state rules. The encrypted volumes managed config rule automatically checks all attached EBS volumes against an encryption requirement and marks non-compliant resources, enabling continuous compliance evaluation without manual checks. Amazon CloudWatch collects performance metrics and operational logs and triggers alarms on threshold breaches. It monitors how systems are performing, but does not capture caller identity for API events or evaluate resource configuration compliance. AWS Config does not capture the identity of who made an API call. That is exclusively the role of CloudTrail. Amazon Guard Duty performs intelligent threat detection by analyzing CloudTrail, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs for malicious or anomalous behavior. It does not assess resource configuration properties such as whether an EBS volume is encrypted. Let's slow down here. These four services get mixed up constantly, and it's worth getting them straight. Imagine your security team gets a call. Someone changed our password policy. Who was it? That's CloudTrail's job. CloudTrail records every API call in your account, with the caller's identity, the time, and the source. Now flip it. You want to know if your 50 EBS volumes are all encrypted right now. You don't care who did it. You care about the current state. That's AWS Config. Config runs managed rules and flags any unencrypted volume automatically. CloudWatch watches metrics, not API callers. Guard Duty hunts for threats, not configuration gaps. The exam mixes these four up constantly. Identity auditing always points to CloudTrail, and compliance checking always points to config. Here we go. Question 5. Pay attention to what is really asked. A cloud architect at Litware Corp is reviewing the company's AWS architecture against the AWS well-architected framework. The architect wants to identify design decisions that align specifically with the sustainability pillar. Which approach reflects a sustainability pillar design principle? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Renewable energy sources is the sustainability pillar's signature phrase. The sustainability pillar of the AWS well-architected framework focuses on minimizing environmental impact. Selecting regions powered by renewable energy is a core sustainability design principle. When latency or data residency constraints are flexible, choosing a region with a lower carbon footprint reduces the environmental cost of running the workload. Deploying across multiple availability zones addresses the reliability pillar by preventing failures from affecting the full workload. Enabling CloudTrail aligns with the security pillar's auditing and traceability principle. Configuring least privilege IAM policies also belongs to the security pillar under the access management design principle. Security services dominated the first 5 questions and each has a strict lane. WAF blocks web exploits at layer 7. Shield absorbs network floods at layer 3 and 4. Guard Duty reads logs for behavioral threats. OK. Question 6. Anchor on the exact workload. Northwind Enterprises has a data center in Chicago and must establish connectivity to AWS with consistent 1 gigabit per second throughput. The company's compliance policy explicitly prohibits any workload traffic from traversing the public internet. Which connectivity option satisfies both the bandwidth consistency requirement and the compliance restriction? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. No public internet plus consistent gigabit eliminates every VPN option instantly. AWS Direct Connect establishes a dedicated private network link between an on-premises facility and AWS that completely bypasses the public internet. A 1 gigabit per second dedicated connection is provisioned as a direct physical Ethernet port at an AWS Direct Connect location, delivering consistent and predictable bandwidth and latency. Because traffic never traverses shared internet infrastructure, this fully satisfies compliance requirements prohibiting public internet paths. AWS Site-to-Site VPN creates an encrypted IPsec tunnel, but all traffic is still routed over the public internet regardless of encryption strength or BGP configuration. The public internet path directly violates the compliance restriction and cannot guarantee consistent throughput because bandwidth is shared with other internet traffic. AWS Client VPN is designed for connecting individual end-user devices to a VPC, not for connecting an entire data center. It also routes over the public internet. AWS Transit Gateway with an internet-facing attachment routes traffic over the public internet and provides no dedicated bandwidth guarantee, failing both requirements. Next up, question 7. Underline the key phrase mentally. Tailspin Logistics is preparing its cloud migration strategy using the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, CAF. The Transformation Steering Committee needs to identify which CAF perspective governs capabilities related to organizational design, workforce planning, cloud skills training programs, and managing the cultural change required for the migration. Which CAF perspective owns these capabilities? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Workforce planning and cultural change always belong to the people perspective. The people perspective of the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework focuses on the human side of cloud transformation. It covers organizational culture and structure, workforce resource management, cloud skills training, leadership development, and organizational change management. These capabilities help organizations bridge the gap between existing talent and the roles needed for cloud adoption. The business perspective focuses on financial management, strategy alignment, and ensuring cloud investments link to business outcomes. The governance perspective addresses audit, compliance, risk management, and business process oversight. The operations perspective covers IT service delivery, application and infrastructure management, and incident response processes, the day-to-day running of cloud operations rather than the organizational change dimension. Next up, question 8. Do not stop at the first match. Conteso Core's newly hired security engineer is reviewing the AWS root user configuration and discovers that a developer created programmatic access keys for the root user to use in automation scripts, and multi-factor authentication has never been enabled on the root account. Which two actions should the security engineer take immediately to remediate these findings? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option C. Root keys must not exist at all. Rotation doesn't fix the underlying risk. Root user access keys represent a critical security vulnerability because the root user has unrestricted access to all AWS services and resources, and cannot be constrained by any IAM policy. AWS explicitly states that root access keys should be deleted immediately and never recreated for any purpose, including automation scripts. Programmatic access should use IAM roles or IAM users scoped to the minimum permissions required for each task. Enabling multi-factor authentication on the root account is a foundational security control that protects against unauthorized account access even if the root password is compromised. Rotating the root access keys to new credentials does not eliminate the underlying risk. The problem is that root access keys exist at all, not which specific key value is in use. Creating an IAM user with administrator access represents an improvement over root keys, but still violates the principle of least privilege. Automation scripts should use roles or users with only the specific permissions required for their function. The AWS root user account cannot be suspended. It is permanently associated with the AWS account and cannot be removed or disabled. This one has two sneaky distractors. Let's break down exactly what the question is asking you to do. Imagine you start a new security job and find the master password taped to the monitor. That's root access keys in an automation script. The root user can delete every IAM user and empty every S3 bucket. No policy can stop it. AWS's rule is absolute. Delete root keys, not rotate them. Delete them. Rotating just swaps one live grenade for another. The question has two findings. Keys exist, and MFA is disabled. Immediately remediate means you fix both. Option D, an IAM user with admin access, sounds helpful, but that's not what the question asked. The exam rewards delete and protect root, not find a workaround. Next up, we're on question 9. Northwind Financial Security Team discovered that unauthorized API calls were made between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. to delete several Amazon CloudWatch log groups. They need to conduct a forensic investigation to determine which IAM identity executed the calls, the exact API actions performed, the timestamp of each event, and the originating IP address. Which AWS service contains this information? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Every real incident response investigation starts with CloudTrail. AWS CloudTrail records every API call made to AWS services and captures a complete event history that includes the IAM user or role that made the call, the specific API action performed, the timestamp, the originating IP address, the AWS region, and the request parameters. CloudTrail is the authoritative source for answering who did what and when within an AWS account, making it the primary tool for security forensic investigations. Amazon CloudWatch Metrics collects numerical performance data such as CPU utilization, request latency, and invocation counts. It does not record the identity, specific action, or source IP address of API callers. AWS Config continuously records resource configuration states and evaluates them against compliance rules to track whether resource configurations have changed over time. It does not capture the caller identity or IP address associated with each API action. Amazon CloudWatch Logs Insights is a query engine for analyzing application and infrastructure log data ingested into CloudWatch logs by applications and AWS services. It does not contain the AWS API audit trail that records IAM identity and call origin. Now, question 10. Picture the scenario first. A software team at a Datum corporation is building an application that runs on EC2 instances and writes log files to an Amazon S3 bucket. A junior developer suggests embedding AWS access keys directly in the application's configuration files and checking them into the source repository. A security engineer objects to this approach. Which alternative should the security engineer recommend? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Instance metadata delivers temporary credentials automatically, zero secrets to store. Attaching an IAM role to EC2 instances is the AWS recommended approach for granting applications access to AWS services. The role's temporary credentials are automatically delivered to the instance via the EC2 instance metadata service, rotated automatically by AWS, and never need to be stored in code, configuration files, or environment variables. This eliminates the risk of credential exposure through source control leaks or log files. Storing access keys in Systems Manager Parameter Store is an improvement over hard coding but still requires managing long-term IAM user credentials, which carry higher risk than the short-lived, automatically rotated credentials provided by IAM roles. Creating an IAM user with environment variables avoids source control exposure, but still uses long-term static credentials that must be manually rotated and can be leaked through EC2 system logs, AMI snapshots, or memory dumps. Using root account credentials violates the IAM best practice of never creating root access keys and grants unrestricted access to every AWS resource in the account. CloudTrail answered 2 forensic questions in a row. It owns caller identity and source IP. IAM roles beat static keys because the instance metadata service rotates credentials automatically. Now, let's open question 11. The security team at Adatum Corporation discovered that an Amazon S3 bucket's public access block settings were disabled approximately 2 months ago, potentially exposing sensitive data. The team needs to identify which IAM entity made that change and from which IP address the API call originated. Which AWS service should they query? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Caller identity plus source IP in the stem always signals CloudTrail. AWS CloudTrail captures a complete record of every API call made in an AWS account, including the identity of the IAM user or role that made the call, the source IP address, the timestamp, and the specific parameters of the request. Querying CloudTrail event history delivers the audit information needed to determine who disabled the S3 public access block and from where. Amazon CloudWatch monitors operational metrics and application performance, but does not capture the identity or source IP of API-level changes. AWS Config tracks the historical configuration state of resources and can detect that a setting changed, but it does not record the IAM identity or source IP of the change. Amazon Guard Duty analyzes CloudTrail events among other sources to detect threats, but is focused on surfacing security findings rather than providing a queryable audit trail for investigation. Let us keep moving. Question 12. Match the answer to the situation. Conteso Corp recently expanded and now operates 1 AWS management account and 5 member accounts. The CFO has 3 requirements: receive a single monthly invoice covering charges from all 6 accounts, ensure the entire organization qualifies for volume-based pricing discounts on Amazon S3 that only activate at higher usage thresholds, and allow reserved instances purchased in the management account to offset matching EC2 usage costs in any of the 5 member accounts. Which AWS feature enables all 3 of these goals simultaneously? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. 3 goals, 1 feature. Find the answer that satisfies all 3 simultaneously. AWS Organizations with consolidated billing aggregates usage and charges from all member accounts under a single management account, which produces 1 monthly invoice for the entire organization. Consolidated billing also pools usage across accounts for the purpose of volume-based pricing tiers, so the combined S3 storage across all 6 accounts counts toward higher discount thresholds that individual accounts might not reach independently. Reserved instance benefits and savings plans are automatically shared across all accounts within an AWS organization, unless the feature is explicitly disabled, meaning a reserved instance purchased in the management account automatically reduces costs for matching EC2 instance usage in any member account. AWS Cost Explorer is an analytics and visualization tool that can display spending broken down by linked account and generate cost recommendations, but it does not change how accounts are billed or how discounts are allocated across accounts. AWS Budgets creates spending thresholds and notification alerts, but does not affect billing consolidation, volume discount aggregation, or reserved instance sharing. Cost allocation tags label individual AWS resources for cost attribution and reporting purposes, but have no effect on how charges are consolidated or how volume discounts and reserved instance benefits are distributed. Time for another one. Question 13. The verb matters here. Adatum Corp operates a globally distributed web application with identical servers deployed in the US East, North Virginia, and EU West, Ireland, AWS regions. The company's requirement is to route each user to the server that provides the lowest measured network response time for their connection, regardless of where the user is physically located. Which Amazon Route 53 routing policy meets this requirement? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Lowest measured response time is latency-based routing, not geolocation. Latency-based routing in Amazon Route 53 directs users to the AWS region or resource that provides the lowest measured network latency for their connection. Route 53 uses a continuously updated latency database to determine the fastest destination for each user, independent of physical location. This directly satisfies the requirement to minimize network response time. Geolocation routing directs users based on their physical or inferred geographic location, rather than actual measured latency. A user in Europe could have lower latency to a US region than a European one depending on network conditions. Weighted routing distributes traffic in a configured proportion between resources without considering latency at all. Failover routing is a disaster recovery mechanism that sends all traffic to a secondary resource only when a health check detects the primary resource has failed. Time for another one. Question 14. Convert the story into selection criteria. A fintech startup is building a real-time trading leaderboard that requires microsecond read latency. The application's session state and leaderboard rankings must persist durably across node failures. The data must survive cluster restarts with zero loss. Which AWS service should they use? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. ElastiCache is a cache. MemoryDB is a durable database. They are not interchangeable. Amazon MemoryDB for Redis is designed for workloads that require both the speed of an in-memory data store and the durability of a primary database. MemoryDB stores all data durably across multiple availability zones using a distributed transactional log, meaning every write is acknowledged only after it is persisted. Data survives node failures and complete cluster restarts, making MemoryDB appropriate as a primary database rather than a cache layer. Amazon ElastiCache for Redis provides in-memory caching and supports multi as replication for high availability, but it is fundamentally a cache. In certain failure scenarios, ElastiCache can lose data, and AWS explicitly draws the distinction. ElastiCache is a cache where data can be lost, while MemoryDB is a database where data is durable. For a trading leaderboard where all rankings must survive restarts intact, ElastiCache introduces unacceptable durability risk. DynamoDB Accelerator is a purpose-built in-memory cache for DynamoDB that reduces DynamoDB read latency from milliseconds to microseconds. It caches DynamoDB items and query results, but cannot function as a standalone primary data store and requires DynamoDB as the backing database. Amazon RDS for PostgreSQL with read replicas delivers millisecond range latency, which does not satisfy the microsecond read latency requirement of a real-time trading leaderboard. ElastiCache and MemoryDB both run Redis. Let's look at why only one of them works here. Picture two Redis clusters running in AWS. They look almost identical. Both use the Redis API, both span multiple availability zones. Here's the trap. ElastiCache for Redis is a cache. If the primary node crashes before a write replicates to the standby, that write is gone. MemoryDB logs every write to a transaction log across multiple availability zones before acknowledging it. So if your cluster dies at 3 a.m. during a 50,000 rank update burst, every ranking is intact when it comes back. The question says zero loss and survive cluster restarts. That's a database guarantee. ElastiCache can't promise that. MemoryDB can. Ready. Question 15. Test each option against the full ask. Adatum Financial Services has deployed EC2 instances running a payment processing application. The security team has two independent goals: Continuously monitor CloudTrail logs and VPC flow logs for signs of malicious activity such as unauthorized API calls and cryptocurrency mining, and scan EC2 instances and container images for known software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposure. Which combination of services satisfies both goals? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Behavioral threat detection and vulnerability scanning are two separate jobs. Amazon Guard Duty is a managed threat detection service that continuously analyzes CloudTrail management events, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs using machine learning and threat intelligence to identify malicious activity. It detects behaviors such as unusual API calls, compromised credentials, and cryptocurrency mining without requiring agents or additional infrastructure changes. Amazon Inspector is a vulnerability management service that automatically scans EC2 instances and Amazon ECR container images for software vulnerabilities listed in the CVE database and flags unintended network exposure, such as instances reachable from the public internet. Together, Guard Duty and Inspector address both security goals independently. AWS Security Hub aggregates, normalizes, and prioritizes security findings from multiple services including Guard Duty and Inspector, but does not perform independent threat detection or vulnerability scanning itself. AWS Config tracks configuration changes to AWS resources and evaluates them against compliance rules, but does not analyze logs for active threat patterns or scan for software vulnerabilities in running instances. Amazon Macy uses machine learning to discover and protect sensitive data stored in Amazon S3. It does not perform EC2 vulnerability assessments or threat detection from network flow logs. Sustainability appeared 3 times. Renewable energy and carbon footprint are its fingerprint. MemoryDB and ElastiCache look identical until you need data to survive a restart. Let us switch gears. Question 16. Do not skim the condition. A Datum Corp is conducting a well-architected framework review. The infrastructure team asks which of the 6 pillars specifically provides design principles for minimizing the environmental impact of cloud workloads, including selecting AWS regions powered by renewable energy, maximizing server utilization efficiency, and reducing carbon emissions from cloud infrastructure. Which well-architected framework pillar addresses these goals? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Environmental footprint and renewable energy lock this to sustainability again. The sustainability pillar is the 6th pillar added to the AWS well-architected framework in December 2021. Its design principles focus on minimizing the environmental footprint of cloud workloads by maximizing resource utilization to reduce unnecessary hardware provisioning, choosing AWS regions powered by renewable energy, and designing architectures that avoid wasteful compute, storage, and data transfer. The cost optimization pillar focuses on reducing financial expenditure and eliminating unnecessary spending. While right-sizing has sustainability co-benefits, the pillar's objective is economic, not environmental. Operational excellence addresses running and monitoring workloads effectively and continuously improving processes and procedures, not environmental impact. Performance efficiency focuses on using computing resources efficiently to meet system requirements and scaling as demand changes, with the goal of resource effectiveness rather than carbon footprint reduction. Ready. Question 17. Choose for this case, not every case. Tailspin Enterprises operates dozens of AWS services in a single production account shared by 3 business units: sales, engineering, and operations. The finance team needs monthly cost reports showing exactly how much each business unit spent on AWS, with the breakdowns visible in Cost Explorer and the Cost and Usage Report. What must they configure to achieve this granular cost categorization? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Tags only appear in Cost Explorer after activation in the billing console. Cost allocation tags are key value metadata labels applied directly to AWS resources that, once activated in the AWS billing console, appear as filterable dimensions in Cost Explorer and as selectable columns in the cost and usage report. By tagging resources with a key such as business unit and values such as sales, engineering, and operations, the finance team can view and filter costs by business unit without restructuring their account. Creating separate accounts per business unit achieves cost isolation, but introduces significant operational overhead for a single organization, and is unnecessary when tags can attribute costs within a single account. AWS Budgets provides spending alerts and thresholds, but does not create cost breakdown dimensions or retroactively categorize existing resource spending by any metadata attribute. CloudWatch monitors operational metrics and resource utilization but does not provide financial cost data or billing breakdowns. Keep your focus here. Question 18. The wording is the clue. A security engineer at Contesso Healthcare is designing network traffic controls for a new application tier in an Amazon VPC. One control must operate at the subnet level and require explicit rules for both inbound and outbound traffic, since return traffic is not automatically permitted. A second control must operate at the individual instance level and automatically allow return traffic for established connections without requiring explicit outbound rules. Which two AWS networking features satisfy these respective requirements? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Stateless at the subnet versus stateful at the instance, two completely different tools. Network access control lists, NACLs, operate at the subnet level and are stateless, meaning they evaluate each packet independently without tracking connection state. Both inbound and outbound rules must be explicitly defined, including rules for return traffic. By default, a custom NACL denies all traffic unless rules are explicitly added. Security groups operate at the instance, ENI, level and are stateful, meaning they track connection state and automatically allow return traffic for any connection that matches an inbound rule, without requiring a corresponding outbound rule. AWS WAF Web ACLs inspect HTTP and HTTPS application layer traffic for exploits such as SQL injection and cross-site scripting. They do not perform subnet-level or instance-level packet filtering. AWS Shield Advanced provides managed DDoS protection against volumetric and protocol-based attacks rather than access control filtering. VPC flow logs capture metadata about accepted and rejected traffic for auditing purposes but do not enforce any traffic filtering rules. This one trips up a lot of people. Let's get the stateless versus stateful thing straight. Think of your VPC like an office building. NACLs are the security desk in the lobby. They check every person in and out with a clipboard. If you allow port 443 inbound but forget to write a matching outbound rule for the response, those packets get dropped. Security groups are the badge reader on each office door. They remember you badged in, so your badge lets you out too. No extra rule needed. NACLs guard the whole subnet and are stateless. Security groups guard individual instances and are stateful. Stateless means you write rules in both directions. That's exactly the trap this question is testing. Keep your focus here. Question 19. Map the qualifier to the answer. Adatum Healthcare is designing a patient record system. The operations requirement states that the system must remain operational with minimal downtime if a single data center experiences an outage, but the requirement explicitly does not demand zero downtime. Which architectural design approach correctly matches this requirement? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Minimal downtime and zero downtime are different requirements, read the qualifier carefully. High availability (HA) architecture is explicitly designed to minimize downtime through redundancy and automated failover, not to eliminate it entirely. Deploying across multiple availability zones with elastic load balancing and auto-scaling reduces mean time to recovery and satisfies the minimal downtime requirement without over-engineering. Fault-tolerant architecture targets zero downtime through complete redundancy at every layer, which is significantly more expensive and exceeds the stated requirement. Disaster recovery is focused on recovering from major large-scale outages with a planned recovery time objective, and is distinct from ongoing high availability. Backup and restore strategies allow data recovery after a failure, but do not maintain continuous availability, making them unsuitable as an HA solution. Alright, question 20. Watch for must, most, least, or except. A cloud architect reviewing a workload against the AWS well-architected framework identifies one pillar that focuses on minimizing the environmental impact of running cloud workloads by selecting AWS regions with higher renewable energy usage, reducing unnecessary compute and storage consumption, and choosing efficient hardware. Which pillar of the AWS well-architected framework is being described? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Renewable energy is the sustainability fingerprint, third appearance this batch. The sustainability pillar was added to the AWS well-architected framework in December 2021 as the sixth and newest pillar. It focuses on minimizing the environmental footprint of cloud workloads through shared responsibility for environmental outcomes, selecting AWS regions that use higher percentages of renewable energy, reducing total compute and storage requirements to complete business tasks, and preferring energy-efficient architectures. Cost optimization focuses on eliminating unnecessary financial expenditure and right-sizing resources to minimize spending, while reducing waste overlaps with sustainability. The driving motivation and metrics are financial, not environmental. Operational excellence focuses on running systems effectively, automating operational procedures, and continuously improving processes to deliver business value. Performance efficiency focuses on using the right resource types and sizes to meet technical system requirements efficiently, primarily to maximize performance relative to cost rather than to minimize environmental impact. 3 takeaways from this session. First, CloudTrail captures caller identity and source IP, config captures resource configuration state, never swap them. Second, root user access keys must be deleted entirely, rotating to new credentials leaves the same critical risk in place. Third, sustainability is the only well-architected pillar measured by renewable energy and carbon footprint, not financial cost. Every security question this batch tested the same thing, whether each service has exactly one distinct job in your head. Lock in those boundaries and the monitoring cluster becomes free points. Quick favor before you go: subscribing is the free way to support this and to reach more people on the same path. Drop your score in the comments and any question you'd want more detail on. Want a specific certification next? Name it below, and if the speed or look of these could be better, I'm listening.